Greetings. I'm so glad that you're here with us for another Wellness Wednesday. I'm Dr. Thema Bryant-Davis, psychologist and candidate for president elect of the American Psychological Association. We have started this series of Wellness Wednesdays to keep you informed about the role of psychology in helping people to not only survive, but also thrive. I'm really excited for today's conversation as our topic is going to be from Little League to the Olympics, psychologists helping athletes to cope and to thrive. And I am especially excited that one of my dream team members is here as a special guest, Dr. William Parham. Dr. William is a professor in the counseling program and interim director of the doctoral program in educational leadership for social justice at Loyola Marymount University. He has served as an interim associate dean of faculty, chair of the Department of Specialized Programs in Professional Psychology, program director of the counseling program, and president of the LMU Faculty Senate. Dr. Parham, also known as Dr. P, has devoted his professional career to teaching, training, clinical, administrative, and organizational consultation venues. He is a licensed psychologist, board certified in counseling psychology by the American Board of Professional Psychology, and past president of the Society of Counseling Psychology of the American Psychological Association, where he is also recognized as a fellow in Division 17, Society of Counseling Psychology, 45, Society for the Study of Culture, Ethnicity, and Race, and 47, Exercise and Sports Psychology. In addition, Dr. Parham serves currently as the inaugural director of the Mental Health and Wellness Program of the National Basketball Players Association, a position he has held since 2018. He is a member of the Mental Health and Wellness Task Force of the United States Olympic and Paralympic Committee and a member of an international think tank on the mental health and wellness of athletes. Welcome, Dr. Parham. I am so glad that you're here.
Well, good afternoon, Thema, and you are the Dream Team president elect,
Oh,
and we really appreciate your talents and thank you for the invitation to participate in this conversation. It's long overdue,
oh, thank
and
you.
I appreciate your acknowledgement of it and
Oh,
my participation in it. So thank you.
I am really grateful for your expertise because there are so many in our communities nationally and then also internationally that are struggling. And one of the groups that often gets overlooked in terms of their mental health is athletes. And
Yes.
so I believe this conversation is especially timely as the Olympics is in the news. And then, as we mentioned in the title, even as far as Little League and trying to figure out and navigate connections for children and for youth. So, can you share with us or can you describe the types of stress that athletes are facing, particularly during these times?
It's a great question, Dr. Thema. And in order to really understand and appreciate the stress athletes experience across sports and across the developmental spectrum, it is first important to understand and appreciate that context is everything. In short, you can't fully comprehend an athlete's response to situations they deem stressful unless we get at least a glimpse of who they are and the life experiences that have shaped who they have discovered themselves to be.
Mm,
With that said, athletes across sports and developmental spectrums find opportunities for growth, otherwise known as challenges, when seeking to answer questions such as, who am I? What am I really capable of accomplishing? And what strategies can I employ that will bring my talents to fruition?
mm,
When will I see the results of what I believe I can accomplish? Why do I want to put myself through the grit and the grind of preparation, which includes workouts and nutrition and sleep? And how long do I want to execute the discipline, commitment, sacrifice that come with decisions to pursue excellence in sports? Related, hidden within the activities such as daily practices, health and fitness routines, and actual competitions are answers to the above referenced questions. I also want to acknowledge that are dual pandemics of COVID-19 and racism, and the confusing, chaotic, harsh, and sometimes angering byproducts of these still unfolding and emotionally exhausting experiences that bring on isolation, lost time to compete, decreased emotional nourishment for fans and family and athletic successes. But also, it can re-trigger traumas, as well as a forced reawakening of painful realities of systematically sanctioned inequities. Nonetheless, these represent opportunities for athletes to explore more deeply through self-reflection their own talents, genius, and life purpose. So there's a lot that can be gained from athletes participating in this. But great question.
Oh, thank you. And I'm so appreciative of you touching on the multiple dynamics. I was thinking even more recently about Naomi coming
Yes.
forward about her mental health concerns and social anxiety. What were your thoughts on that?
If I could, if I would have given her a big hug. I really stretched out to a number of people to really acknowledge her strength as a woman, as a person of
Hmm.
color, as a person who's excelled in sports, and as a person who really took risks, courage, to stand to the plate tall and strong, saying, I'm willing to play tennis and excite the fans and do my thing, but I'm a person before a performer.
Yeah,
And the system that I will get to maybe later has not been very kind in that way. And in fact, there are some consequences of her coming forth.
hmm
People were shaming her,
hmm
hating on her, which I think is more a reflection of them than her, quite
yeah,
frankly. But even through that, she's standing strong. I hope that she's surrounding herself
hmm
with people who love and embrace and will nurture her and
hmm
nourish her throughout her journey. But she's a brave young woman,
hmm
and I think she is a model worth emulating.
Definitely. Thank you so much. And I also was thinking about young people who have been training all their lives for the Olympics and are now left with this pressure and stress of, do I go? And if I go, the anxiety related to COVID, the dynamics of not having audience there to be able to support you, just the various fears, as well as racism that has come up even in the pre-game season. And so what have been your thoughts as you're watching the news with the Olympics?
Well, I go on record as saying that I think the Olympics are going on uh, for a couple of reasons, not the least of which is profit over public health. There's absolutely, if you believe the science, the Olympics should have been postponed, delayed, because the area of the world where the event is being held is out of control with this pandemic. Um, and I think that they have, again, put profit over public health. That's just my opinion. That said, I think athletes are aware of that. I think athletes have put in the time, the grit, the grind, the sacrifices to really propel themselves to excellence, to position themselves to perform on the world
Mhm,
stage. And the fact that they really have overcome enormous hurdles to get here.
mhm,
This COVID pandemic is really one additional hurdle that many have begun to hurdle and get over. Some are being held back by it, but I think they have a history of overcoming obstacles. And
yeah.
this is just another one that they have to find strategies, and many have found strategies about how to succeed in this
Mhm,
uncharacteristic time. So I think they are aware and mindful of the circumstances. I think they are aware of the profit over the performance.
mhm.
I think they've made some conscious decisions to participate, to play it safe. And at the end of the day, we'll have to see how it comes. It is, needless
Right.
to say, a historic event, not because it's the Olympics, but because
Mhm.
of the time in which the Olympics is occurring. So we
Yeah,
shall see what happens in the final analysis.
definitely. And psychologically, how do you look at the role of athletes both in the NFL and in the NBA, the WNBA, speaking out against racism, and then also the backlash and the response that many of them face?
Well, I support athletes using their platforms for the advancement of social justice. Uh, a lot of folks in the audience don't think athletes have that time and space or have that right. I totally disagree with that.
Yeah.
I think what many athletes are bringing to light are situations, circumstances that have long histories, 400-year histories,
Hmm.
that also have had 400-year histories from others to erase memories of these atrocities. When you really look at a number of incidents that are going on today, the Black Wall Street, I could go down the list.
Yeah.
But there are companion movements to erase that as if it never happened. The Jewish Holocaust, the
Mm.
Armenian genocide. I mean,
Yeah.
on and on and on. And so there has been a movement, a steady move, to act like this stuff never happened. And I think athletes, because the world is watching, as an enormous opportunity to say what they have to say. And again, this is not a first time. You
Hmm.
look at history of the Olympics and Jesse Owens standing before Hitler. You look at John Carlos and Tommy Smith. When you look at Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, I mean, I can go down the list
Yes.
for years and years, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s. Colin Kaepernick has gotten the most heat because of the sacrifices, but what he has articulated is absolutely no different than what was articulated with Martin Luther King and the Civil Rights March. Was absolutely no different than what John Carlos and Tommy Smith echoed in the 1968 Olympics in Mexico. And so these issues have to continue to be known. Public has to be continually educated about them. Because if you're not, then we silently collude with the erasure of them. And
Mhm.
so I'm all for athletes promoting systemic injustices, oppressions, human rights violations. I do understand that there is a cost for them to do that. I know that they understand that. And so ultimately, it's a decision about how much they want to say, if they want to say anything at all. But I will absolutely always defend the right to say that on that particular stage where they
Yeah.
have an audience who is listening to what they have to say.
Yeah.
I'm
So
real clear about
important.
that. Yeah.
So important as you're naming that, being holistic, right? That we are not just bodies performing for entertainment, but voices and really having agency in terms of our voice, our minds, our hearts. Speaking of which, I know sports psychology has discovered some important strategies and approaches in helping athletes deal with their stress. So, can you share some of those findings or strategies that other psychologists or athletes themselves should be aware of?
Yeah, I'd be glad to do that. And let me say one last thing on this last point we
Yeah.
made. I really also want us to consider, the audience to consider, yeah, performing in the athletic arena, such as the Olympics, and or advocating social justice. It's not an either or situation, both can be done. And just as one can seek to get the gold medal in their sport performance, they can also seek to get a gold medal in their advocacy for social justice. That being said, there are a number of strategies, and I've sort of grouped them into four that psychologists often use to help athletes manage their stress. The first approach is to educate athletes about stress. Like, what is stress? Why
Right.
do we experience it? There's a lot of science that really talks about it as a self protective mechanism. The second strategy involves teaching athletes specific skills and practices, all of which positions them to better respond to and manage the situations they deem as. And these skills and practices include such things as relaxation exercises, varied meditations, and mindfulness. A third strategy might include helping athletes appreciate the importance of goal setting, time management, decision making, and accountability relative to their quest for excellence. Sort of a fourth and final strategy I use, and many others also use, uh, is to capitalize on the opportunities for athletes to explore personal struggles and painful memories that heretofore have gone unchecked and unexamined. You see, we know that these unreconciled issues and concerns and lived experiences often add silently to the stress athletes experience.
Mhm.
And quite frankly, those are the areas that often are not touched upon. And I think that that's a very serious omission. The first three is probably universally done. For
Mhm.
me, the complete picture is really giving them an opportunity to really hear their story and
Mhm.
what forces, experiences have shaped the person they now believe themselves to be.
Mhm.
Really flushing secrets, reconciling past traumas, hurts, wounds. A lot of people carry those invisible tattoos.
Mhm.
An article that I wrote about a year and a half ago, and it's talked about the body keeps the score. We don't ever lose that
Mhm.
kind of stuff. In fact, I've gone on record as saying I'm even more amazed at the excellence of the Hall of Fame performance of athletes who I personally know carry around a lot of this trauma.
Yes.
And I said to myself years and years ago, my wife and I had actually had a conversation. When I was in graduate school, I said, if I was asked by a major sports system to develop a program that really spoke to athletes, and we had a place and a space for them to start addressing some of their issues, to let some of that go and to begin healing early,
Mhm.
I would predict an exponential increase in individual expression of athletic ability, increased team chemistry, because everybody would be on the same page.
Mhm.
Excitement from other teams to say, hey, what are they doing? So you
Mhm.
increase competition. You see more exciting games and competitions. You'd see increased fan engagement and enthusiasm, increased ticket sales, paraphernalia. I mean, everybody wins when you invest in the mental health and wellness of athletes. There's absolutely no question about it. And the fact that they can succeed at the levels at which they are succeeding, carrying around the kind of stuff they are, is absolutely miraculous.
Mhm. I am so appreciative of you naming trauma. And I think often, as you said, it goes unacknowledged and unrecognized. And the trauma shows up in so many ways, and looking for safe spaces for that narrative approach where they can actually tell their stories and really be heard in terms of both the traumas themselves and the impact on their lives. And
Yes,
that's why, trauma and loss is a central part of my platform. And another part
yes,
of the platform is really attending to systems so that we address the individual, but also the systems in which people live and work. And
yes.
so I wonder, beyond the individual athlete, what are some things that teams, coaches, families, or franchises should do to support the mental health of athletes?
I'm real glad that you're asking that question, Tima, because everything needs to be looked at within the system's context. So
Yeah.
permit me to advance for your audience consideration that athlete systems, and I'm talking about the USOPC, the NFL, Major League Baseball, NBA, soccer, tennis, track and field, the NCAA, high school, as well as club sports,
Mm,
have not failed at addressing the mental health and wellness of athletes. That's what everybody is claiming now.
mm,
I don't believe that at all. In fact, I believe that these systems have been quite successful at not addressing the mental health and wellness of athletes they purport to serve. And in doing so, they have colluded with advancing stigma, and in doing so, have endorsed faulty notions that athletes talking about their life challenges and struggles will unlock Pandora's box of compromise. While there's absolutely no evidence to support these beliefs are nonetheless believable. So I think a question needs to be asked: to what degree is the system participating
Mm,
and succeeding at not addressing those issues?
mhm.
I think that that question has to be reframed. And with that reframe, I think much can happen. Specifically, I think that they can begin to uh, have line item budgets that really speak to uh, developing programs, uh, primary, secondary, and tertiary intervention programs. Secondly, they can really advance the conversation of the importance of mental health and wellness in the life of athletes that they serve. Uh, Third, I think that they can insist on developing accountability measures,
Mm,
making sure that there's quality control. So I think a system can do a lot. They have the
yeah.
resources to do a lot, but the first and foremost, I think they have to reframe the question: have we really failed at it, or have we succeeded at not getting it done? I endorse the latter. I think
Mhm.
they can succeed differently.
Mm.
I think they can succeed differently again by advancing the conversation in important ways, using partnering with journalism, for example, and journalists, radio, print media. They can also have line item budget resources to support the development and maintenance of primary, secondary, and tertiary resources. And again, thirdly, they can assist on developing systems of accountability, making sure that these things are done.
This is so critical as we look at the role of each of those systems. And thank you for highlighting that it's not on the individual shoulders alone and needing to be intentional in terms of our
Yes,
effort.
yes,
And, I wonder about, while we talk about athletes, we started with athletes facing stress. But I also know athletes don't just want to cope with stress, they actually want to win. And so I wonder what sports psychology has found about peak performance or helping people to be in flow or to have success to really be able to perform at their highest level.
Well, peak performance or in the flow experiences are real, but they also represent evidence that the athletes have far more talent, energy, creativity, and genius relative to their sport than even they or others have been aware of. In other words, when people get into these zones, it feels like some that it's sort of a crapshoot. You don't know when it's coming, if it'll ever come back, but it is actually very real. Further, athletes can be taught how to access these magical and untouchable moments if they are willing to put in the work necessary to access their reservoir talents. You see, when athletes experience these thought to be one of a kind moments in time, they often comment and say things like it was indescribable, or they say things like there are no words. So their sense of adulation and feeling on top of the world is second to none, and base their desires to re-experience that tremendous feeling. And people around them, fans and friends, know that something is happening and also find themselves experiencing that wow moment vicariously. So the thing to know is that it is accessible, it is not a fluke,
Yeah.
but it does take intentionality, being very deliberate, uh, harnessing the energy that your body innately has to exercise with nuanced detail and consistency the
Mhm.
skills that are needed to exercise and express the talents and the athlete and the sport of their
Yeah.
choice. There's absolutely no question that they can do that, and it's not a
Mm.
fluke.
Beautiful.
Yeah,
That it is possible and accessible and not
absolutely,
just a fluke. Yes.
absolutely.
So we know that being engaged in sports, whether again, Little League all the way to the Olympics, can have the possibility of stress, the possibility of injury. But what are some of the benefits of participating in sports?
The benefits of participating in sports are numerous. feeling accomplished, feeling competent, capable, feeling purpose driven, but also humbled, are as beneficial as deriving satisfaction from knowing that you are modeling what is possible for others whose life's fortunes have eluded them thus far. So a lot of people don't have opportunities that a lot of athletes do. And when they see athletes performing at stellar levels, one, they can lose themselves in those experiences and learn vicariously. But two, they also learn what it takes to really move forward, and learning discipline and accountability. All of that is just real important. Another benefit, though, that people don't like to address is postponing thinking about and reconciling current and past hurts and emotional burdens. That actually represents a big benefit. And it's not until situations such as COVID, and everybody got locked down from everything they do, are they then forced to really confront those demons and those past experiences. But short of something like COVID and the magnitude of it, a sort of quiet, silent benefit is the ability to postpone and not think about stuff you don't want to think about. A last set of benefits include physical, mental, restorative, and sometimes spiritual health. That's all part of the benefits package. And so there's a lot to be gained from participation in sport. To say nothing about learning about teamwork, cooperation, that life isn't about succeeding by a title. Life is about succeeding and being the best which you are capable of becoming. And that's an important message and a benefit derived from sports.
Yes. So important as we consider all of those that you named, and recognizing that for some young people, the coach can play a pivotal role in terms
Yes.
of encouraging them to make good choices, to encouraging them in their education, to take care of their health, and to be a community, a community of people who are connected around a common goal.
Yeah.
And so I am so glad that you named this. And speaking of these benefits, I'm aware that in most of our training programs in psychology, there is no mention of sports psychology. So many times students don't even know it's an option. So, in case we have students who are listening, whether high school students taking a psychology course, undergraduates, or even graduate students, can you talk some about why sports psychology is an important subfield for them to consider?
Well, yes, yeah. And let me comment one last thing on the last question you made, because I want to also add an important distinction. The last thing you mentioned, Dr. Tim, is that coaches can play a pivotal role in one's development. Recent evidence, and not so recent, like 30 years worth of evidence, also suggests that coaches can be very devastating. When you look at examples of the USA Olympic
Yes,
gymnastics, when you
yes,
look at Penn State and Jerry Sandusky, and I can go on and on,
that's right.
these situations have not only
Mm,
emotionally wounded and
mm,
scarred thousands of young athletes,
yeah.
some as young as early two-digit age,
Mm,
but they are now indelibly etched
mhm,
with those painful memories that they have to reconcile.
mhm.
Um, and what's added salt to the wounds is that many of those systems knew that these abuses were going on
Yes.
and silently colluded with not saying anything. So you got to begin to ask in the larger systems questions, what is the real price of the ticket?
Mm,
And when you're
mm,
working with vulnerable age athletes who are trying to play by the rules,
yeah.
do what they can, and they're taken advantage of, that's where they need to really have some more conversation and
Right.
serious accountability
Yes.
and really make some ethical, legal, moral decisions
Hmm.
about what is the price of the ticket? What
Right.
is the weight, the real weight of the
Mm,
goal that we are earning?
hmm. Hmm.
Anyway, that said,
Yeah.
getting back to your question,
But
I
but
just
let me
wanted to
just
say
say
that
I'm
because
glad
actually,
you raised that, because we have to come in, from a measured perspective, right? It's a tool, it's a vehicle. So it can be helpful, it can be harmful. It depends on how it is utilized and who are the people involved. And so, yes, really, really
Yeah.
critical points.
To get to your other question, in terms of, I think mental health and wellness is just a part of everybody's life. I think psychology is the most broad-based discipline in all the world. You can't do anything, engage in any profession, do anything during your day that doesn't involve psychology. So I think for those students listening, you've chosen psychology as a wonderful career. It is just replete with opportunities. I think there are special opportunities in the world of athletics because for many, many years, but also in right current times, there's a lot of denial that mental health and wellness is a thing. There's still significant taboo and shame about it. And so at any point in your near future, when you join in the conversation and really begin advocating, there'll be plenty of work to do for teams,
Mhm.
for individual athletes, for athlete systems, from levels to club all the way to the Olympics. And so if you play your cards right, you should never want for work, for opportunities, and for ways of making a difference and ways that are going to really um, push the conversation forward and move the needle of real change.
Mhm.
So also feel free to connect or stretch out to me, and I can give you any helpful hints that I can be willing to give you helpful hints, advice, counsel on where to go and what to do and how to get there.
That is invaluable. I am so glad that you are making that offer to be a resource for information and guidance for those who would like to learn more. And along those lines, is there any book or a website or other resource that you would recommend for those who are interested, whether already psychologists or psychologists in training or athletes themselves?
Well, there are a couple websites or links I could share. One is if you have your audience go into consensus papers on athlete mental health and wellness. There are two documents actually our think tank produced in the last couple of years that really talk about the importance of mental health and wellness in elite athlete systems and really what you need to consider in putting a program together. That's very, very critical. Um, I certainly would encourage audience to become familiar with, if they aren't already, with the infamous ACE study, the CDC Kaiser study,
Yeah,
because that really is quite eye opening
yeah,
and really should be part of the grounding work of any interventions. Related to that, as I mentioned earlier in this conversation, I authored an article about a year and a half ago called Invisible Tattoos. And if you go into Parham, AEON magazine, Invisible Tattoos, it really talks about the trauma, the childhood trauma of athletes and how they really have turned that around in many cases as sort of that proverbial chip on their shoulder and really have led quite distinguished careers. That's not true of everyone, but
mhm,
it's an experience that many don't talk about,
yeah.
yet is a key to unlocking even more potential and talent that you've seen expressed thus far.
Mm.
So those are a few off the top of my head that come to mind.
Yes, that is great to hear the full range. And we know there is so much important work that has been done by psychologists around sports and promoting and protecting the mental health of athletes. And so I'm so grateful to you for joining on today for this Wellness Wednesday. Thank you for being with me.
Well, it's been my pleasure and honor. And again, I've known you for a long time, Dr. Thema, and I really support your candidacy. I think you are the right person at this time for where we're headed. The fact that you
Thank
even include things like athlete and sport and other areas that aren't traditionally covered, yet
Yeah,
nonetheless are vital to the lived experiences of countless people, both directly but also vicariously. I think
yeah,
is a testament to the broad spectrum that you bring and
mm,
perspectives that you allow to be articulated. And so you got my vote.
Oh, thank you. That means the world. And 20 years ago, we were traveling together,
Yeah, yeah,
yes, to the United Nations Conference Against Racism.
yeah,
So it's so wonderful that all these years later, we both find ourselves in Los Angeles doing
yeah.
this work. So I'm just grateful to have you running with me.
Well, you are a respected colleague and friend and confidant, and continued success as you do your work, because you really are touching the lives of many. And if I may say, you are the gift that keeps on giving. So kudos to you
Ah.
for your leadership and for your strength and courage and really setting the pace.
Thank you so much. And thank you all for joining us. And I want to invite you to join us again next Wednesday. We're going to have another Wellness Wednesday, a discussion with three trauma psychologists. We touched on trauma today, which is a central part of my campaign as well. I'm grateful that you all are here, and we want to be intentional about not stopping just with survival mode, but really getting to the place of thriving not only as individuals, as communities, and as organizations, and globally. So, see you next time for Wellness Wednesday. Thank you so much.
Take care. Bye bye.
Bye bye.